Ladies, have you ever looked in the mirror and silently asked, why do I keep attracting the wrong kind of men? And deep down, feared you might never find someone who truly sees you, respects you, or cherishes your soul? What if I told you that the reason isn't luck, timing, or even the dating apps? It's energy, alignment, and the story you're unconsciously broadcasting every day. And before you roll your eyes and think, oh, great, another just love yourself pep talk, hold on, because what I'm about to share isn't fluff. It's neuroscience, energy, and transformation all rolled into four secrets that will shift how quality men perceive you almost instantly. Imagine stepping into a room and knowing you magnetize the kind of man who aligns with your highest self, not because you said the perfect thing, but because you've become the kind of woman who no longer chases, she draws in. In the next few minutes, we're going to unravel the invisible habits that have blocked your magnetism. And just when you think you've heard it all, I'll drop a final truth that most women never discover until it's too late. So stay with me. This could change everything. You ever had that moment late at night scrolling through your phone, wondering why he didn't call back, or why the guy you bent over backward for vanished like a magician in a cheap tuxedo? Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the silent scream inside so many women who show up, give everything, love deeply, and still feel invisible. But here's a truth that might sting a little. People can only value you as much as you value yourself. Ouch, right? But stay with me, because that sting, if you let it, can become your superpower. We live in a world where it's easy to fake worth. Filters, rehearsed confidence, Instagram quotes about self-love. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, there's this ache, this quiet desperation to be chosen, to be seen. But worth isn't about being chosen. Worth is about choosing yourself so profoundly that anything less becomes unacceptable. Pause there. Let that land. Because if you don't deeply believe you're worthy of a healthy, loving, committed relationship with a man of integrity, you will keep attracting the ones who reflect your self-doubt, not your potential. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't about blame, it's about power. Your power, the kind you forgot you had, the kind you buried under years of playing small, shrinking to make others comfortable, and saying yes when every fiber of your body screamed no. Can we laugh for a second? You know that moment when a guy texts you up at 2 a.m. and you almost convince yourself that it means he cares? Yeah, we've all been there, but those are not the standards of a woman who knows her worth. That's the echo of fear, fear of being alone, fear of not being wanted, fear of what it means if no one is chasing you. But here's the kicker. The moment you stop chasing is the moment everything starts shifting. Knowing your worth means you no longer negotiate with your own intuition. You don't shrink to fit into the box someone else designed. You expand, you elevate, you draw boundaries not as walls, but as invitations. This is how I deserve to be loved, and if you can't meet me here, kindly step aside. And no, it's not always easy. It means sometimes saying no to a maybe, walking away from a good enough because deep down, you know you were made for extraordinary. It's walking into a room not hoping someone picks you, but knowing you bring the value. And if they can't see it, that's their loss, not yours. But let's get real. You don't just wake up one day and magically know your worth. It's built, it's earned, it's a decision you make over and over again. Even when your heart is breaking, even when you're lonely, even when every insecurity you've ever had whispers that maybe you're just asking for too much, you'll be tempted. The ghosts of past patterns will come knocking. A man will show up looking just like everything you thought you wanted, but if you scratch beneath the surface, he's chaos wrapped in charm. And right there, in that moment, you'll be tested. Will you fall back into old habits, or will you rise into your new standard? Because here's the secret they never taught us. Your worth isn't something you earn through achievements, looks, or how well you play the cool girl. It's innate. You were born worthy. The work is in remembering, in unlearning the lies, in stripping away the layers of other people's projections. And that takes guts. It takes courage to look in the mirror and ask, where did I abandon myself just to be loved? It takes fire to stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the feast. Not because you're entitled, but because you're done starving in relationships that leave you emptier than you began. And somewhere in that process, something incredible happens. Your energy shifts. You stop attracting wounded men who need saving and start aligning with emotionally available men who recognize your light because they've done their own work. Men who don't run from your strength but are inspired by it. And suddenly you're not playing games, you're building connections, you're not performing, you're being. And being is magnetic. It's the deepest form of intimacy, but most people will never taste it because they're too afraid to be fully seen. So the question becomes, how deep are you willing to go to become the woman who no longer needs to attract quality men because her very presence demands it? How much are you willing to release, to shed, to walk away from, just to return to yourself? Because the second you commit to that, life starts organizing itself around your worth. You'll see it in how people speak to you, in how men approach you, in the way doors start opening, not because you begged, but because you finally stopped settling. But beware, just when you think you've got it all figured out, life throws one final test your way. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you showed someone who you really are? Not the polished, rehearsed version, not the I'm fine when you're crumbling inside, but the real, messy, radiant, unfiltered you. Scary, right? Because we live in a world that teaches us how to perform before we even learn how to be. You were taught to smile when you wanted to scream, to be agreeable even when it cost you your truth, to be likable instead of real. And then you wonder why you're exhausted, disconnected, and still attracting people who don't truly see you. But the truth is, if you're hiding, you're attracting people who love your mask, not your soul. Here's a brutal but freeing truth. You cannot build a real relationship from a place of pretense. And yet, so many women, brilliant, beautiful, capable women, walk through life wearing personas like armor, terrified that if someone saw the full picture, they'd leave. But what if the exact thing you're hiding is the key to the connection you crave? Think about that. What if your quirks, your weird humor, your wild ambition, your sensitive heart, what if those were the very things that would draw in a man who's been waiting for a woman like you? Funny how we say we want authenticity from others, but we struggle to give it to ourselves. Ever notice how quickly we edit ourselves on a date? You love sci-fi, but suddenly you're into rom-coms because he is. You're craving deep conversation, but you keep the talk surface level so you don't come off too intense. You'd rather spend Saturday night in a bookstore than at a bar, but you say yes anyway. Why? Because deep down there's a whisper that says, if I show too much, he'll run. And maybe some will. But here's the magic. The ones who do were never meant to stay. Authenticity doesn't repel love. It reveals what kind of love you're available for. There's a sacred power in being fully yourself, but it's not for the faint of heart. It requires you to risk being misunderstood, to stand in your truth even when it's unpopular, to laugh too loud, cry too easily, dream too big. You might get called too much. You might feel alone. But being fully expressed is the only path to being fully loved. And once you taste that, you'll never trade it for fake approval again. Let me break the illusion. Being chill doesn't guarantee connection. Playing it safe won't prevent heartbreak. In fact, it only delays the inevitable, because at some point, the real you will want to come up for air, and the people who loved your performance won't recognize your essence. So, how do you start being authentically you, especially in a world that's always telling you who to be? It begins with radical self awareness, listening to your body when it says, this doesn't feel right, trusting your voice when it whispers, you don't have to pretend, catching yourself when you're morphing into who you think someone wants and choosing instead to be who you are. Sounds simple. It's not, because being real will trigger your fears, the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear that if someone sees all of you, they'll leave. But what if they don't? What if they lean in? What if they love you not in spite of your truth, but because of it? Now, let's flip the script for a second. Picture this. You're on a date and you decide not to perform. You speak your mind, you share your passions, you let your laughter fill the room. No filter, no shrinking. He's either captivated or he walks away. Either outcome is a win. Why? Because clarity is a gift. You're not wasting time. You're not bending yourself into a shape that doesn't fit. You're honoring your essence, and that kind of self respect becomes magnetic. The right man isn't looking for a fantasy, he's looking for someone whose truth aligns with his, and he can't find you if you're hiding. Let's throw in a pattern interrupt here. Remember that time you faked liking sushi just to impress a guy, and then you gagged through an entire dinner while pretending it was so good? Yeah, let's not do that anymore. Being real means saying, no thanks, I'll take the pasta. It's small but powerful because every time you honor your truth, you send a message to your subconscious I matter. And that message builds over time. It becomes the foundation of unshakable self trust. And that trust, that's the energy shift that changes your relationships. But authenticity doesn't just transform how you date, it changes who you attract. The moment you start living as your fullest self, something wild happens. People who don't align with your truth begin to fall away, not because you push them, but because they no longer recognize the energy you're operating from. You stop drawing in emotionally unavailable men, narcissists, or men who want to mold you into something you're not. Instead, you begin to meet men who are emotionally safe, curious, grounded, because your frequency is no longer chaos, it's clarity. Still, let's not sugarcoat it. Being authentic will cost you. It will cost you the comfort of fitting in. It will cost you the illusion of safety that comes with people pleasing. It will cost you temporary attention, but it will give you something far greater, real connection. The kind that doesn't need to be chased, the kind that sees you fully and chooses you anyway. But before you get there, you have to confront the parts of yourself you've kept locked away, the parts you were told were too sensitive, too strong, too weird. Those parts are your gold. There will come a moment, maybe sooner than you think, when you're sitting across from someone and everything in you wants to perform. But instead, you take a breath and you let them see you. Not the curated version, not the highlight reel, you. And in that moment, everything changes. When was the last time you felt truly lit up? Not because of someone else's attention, not because of a relationship status change or a sweet text, but because you were simply alive, connected, and in love with your own life. That kind of joy is rare, and most people don't even realize how desperately they need it until they're drowning in loneliness, wondering why they keep ending up in unfulfilling connections that feel more like emotional transactions than love. The hard truth, if your joy is always outsourced, so is your power. And when your happiness depends on who's texting, who's showing up, or who's validating you, you're not attracting love. You're attracting rescue missions disguised as romance. There's this cultural lie that says you're not whole until someone chooses you. But let's expose it. If your life feels dull, heavy, or half lived without a partner, it's not love you're missing. It's you. You can't magnetize someone into your world when you haven't built a world worth inviting them into. And no, that doesn't mean fake joy. You don't have to become a glittery, over the top, overly positive version of yourself. It means cultivating real, grounded joy, the kind that's rooted in self respect, in creating a life that excites you, in filling your own cup so completely that anyone who enters your space is just adding to your overflow, not filling your void. Let's get honest for a second. How much of your identity has been wrapped up in waiting, waiting for the message, waiting for the weekend plans, waiting for a man to choose you so you can finally feel like you're enough, waiting to live fully until he arrives? It's exhausting, isn't it? Like being stuck on pause while the rest of the world hits play. And yet, so many women do it. They postpone happiness, shrink their schedules, mute their passions, all because they're saving room for someone who hasn't even shown up yet. But that's not romantic, that's self abandonment in slow motion. Imagine how different your energy would be if you stopped waiting and started living. Imagine waking up and creating a day that feeds your soul, regardless of who's watching. You'd walk differently, speak differently, breathe differently. You wouldn't just attract love, you'd become the kind of woman who sets the standard for it, because joy is magnetic, real joy. Not performative happiness or forced smiles, but the kind that bubbles up when you're aligned with your purpose, your desires, your truth. Let's throw in a quick pattern interrupt here. Do you know how many women have forgotten what they actually like to do? Like, if no one was watching and you had a free day, would you even know how to enjoy it? Would you wander aimlessly through Target, hoping something calls to you? Or worse, doom scroll for hours, pretending you're relaxing? That's not joy, that's sedation. Cultivating joy means becoming fluent in your own passions again. It means remembering what lit you up before heartbreak dimmed your light. And yes, at first it might feel awkward, like dancing when no one else is dancing, but keep going. That awkwardness is the dust shaking off your spirit. Here's the key: when you make your joy a non negotiable, you stop tolerating anything that drains it. You stop entertaining men who bring drama instead of peace. You stop accepting relationships that steal your laughter. And suddenly, your standards rise, not out of ego, but out of alignment. You've tasted what a full life feels like, and you're unwilling to shrink back into survival mode for the sake of temporary companionship. That shift is powerful because a woman who's rooted in her own joy becomes unshakable. She no longer performs for love, she attracts it effortlessly because her energy speaks before she does. But let's not pretend it's always easy. There's a reason so many people avoid cultivating joy. It forces you to take responsibility for your life. No more blaming your ex, your job, your past. No more hiding behind the excuse of being too busy. Building joy means getting intentional. It means carving space in your day for the things that nourish you. And it means facing the uncomfortable truth that you may have neglected yourself for years. That truth can hurt, but it's also the moment you reclaim your life. Now, let's pivot. Picture your life as a garden. For years, maybe you've been hoping someone would show up with seeds and start planting, but what if instead you began planting your own? Passion projects, girls' trips, morning rituals, movement, music, healing, laughter, a deep belly laugh at a ridiculous meme that only you get. These things aren't distractions, they're soul food. And when your garden is blooming, the right man isn't coming to save you. He's showing up with his own seeds, ready to co create something vibrant with you, but only if there's already life in your soil. And here's the twist you didn't see coming: cultivating your own joy also acts as a powerful filter. It makes it impossible to fall for men who prey on emotional emptiness. You see through the breadcrumbs, you spot the red flags early. Why? Because your joy is sacred and you won't give access to anyone who doesn't honor it. You stop bending, you stop begging, you stop betraying yourself for breadcrumbs. You become the woman who is full, not perfect, not emotionless, but full, and fullness is irresistible. But there's still one layer most people miss. Cultivating joy isn't just about what you do, it's about how you see. It's choosing to find beauty in the mundane, gratitude in the ordinary, strength in your solitude. It's the decision to stop waiting for life to thrill you and start thrilling yourself. That's when everything changes. Because when you become the source, you stop chasing the spark. You are the spark. You stop looking for a man to create your joy, and instead, you invite someone to share in the fire you've already built. And here's where it gets really interesting. Have you ever looked back at a relationship and thought, how did I even end up here? You didn't plan on lowering your standards. You didn't wake up one morning and decide, let me ignore red flags, silence my needs, and overextend myself just to keep someone around. But somehow, slowly, subtly, it happened. And you wonder why you feel drained, unseen, confused, like you're pouring love into a bottomless pit. It's not because you're unworthy, it's because your standards weren't clearly defined and fiercely protected. And without clear standards, love becomes a guessing game where you lose every time. Let's stop romanticizing potential and start honoring reality, because love is not a project. You're not a contractor hired to renovate a man's character. Yet so many women get trapped in the cycle of fixing, hoping, justifying, telling themselves he's trying while ignoring the fact that trying doesn't equal showing up. But here's the deeper truth: people will always rise or fall to the level of standards you set, not the ones you talk about, the ones you enforce. And if you don't know what you stand for, you'll fall for anything disguised as affection. Standards are not ultimatums, they're declarations of self respect. Let's pause for a second and throw in a pattern: interrupt. Remember that one guy who couldn't commit, ghosted for a week, then came back like nothing happened, and somehow convinced you he just needed space. That's what happens when standards aren't clear. You rationalize chaos because deep down you don't want to seem too demanding, too high maintenance, too much. But let's be honest, the fear of being too much is what keeps you accepting far too little. And setting standards isn't about being cold or rigid, it's about creating emotional safety for you. So you stop playing emotional roulette every time you get close to someone. When your standards are clear, you start dating differently. You listen with your eyes, not just your heart. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. You begin to recognize that consistency is sexier than charm, that respect is more attractive than empty compliments. And it's not because you've become cynical, it's because you've become conscious. That shift changes everything. Because when you know your standards, you don't waste energy trying to decode mixed signals. You let clarity filter out confusion. You understand that a man's potential is irrelevant if his patterns are chaotic. But clarity takes courage, because once you set a standard, you have to be willing to enforce it, even if it means walking away from someone you want. That's the part nobody talks about. Setting a boundary is easy. Holding it when your heart is on the line, that's where most people break. Because it hurts. It hurts to choose solitude over attachment. It hurts to walk away from the fantasy you built in your head. But what hurts more is staying in a situation where you're slowly eroding your self-worth just to keep someone who was never yours to begin with. It's tempting to compromise when your fear of being alone is louder than your desire to be respected. But here's what's at stake. Every time you abandon a standard to keep someone, you teach your nervous system that your needs are negotiable. That love means sacrificing your peace. That relationships are built on tolerating discomfort rather than creating alignment. And that lesson doesn't stay confined to one relationship. It bleeds into all areas of your life. Until one day you look around and realize you've built a life that looks full from the outside but feels hollow at the core. So, how do you define your standards? Start by asking yourself the hard questions. What are your non negotiables? Not the Pinterest perfect list, but the things that matter when the honeymoon fades. How do you want to feel in a relationship? What behaviors are you no longer willing to tolerate, even from someone you're deeply attracted to? What does emotional safety look like to you? These questions aren't theoretical. They're the blueprint for the love you're available for. And once you're clear, everything starts recalibrating. You stop auditioning, you stop explaining, you stop lowering the volume of your needs to avoid being left. Let's reset with a little humor. Ever told yourself it's fine while wiping away tears and blocking him for the fifth time, only to unblock him 2 hours later? Yeah, that's the loop that ends when standards begin. Because standards create emotional sobriety. They pull you out of the high of temporary attention and anchor you in the truth of long-term compatibility. And truth isn't always sexy. Sometimes it looks like calling yourself out. Sometimes it looks like deleting the number before the apology text even arrives. Sometimes it looks like getting honest about why you keep making excuses for behavior that would horrify your best friend if she saw it. But don't be fooled. Setting clear standards doesn't repel love, it refines it. It makes you unavailable to anything that threatens your peace. It signals to the universe, to others, and most importantly to yourself that you are no longer settling. And yes, it will feel like a purge at first. People will fall away. Some connections will die off. You may have quiet nights, lonely weekends, moments of second guessing. But what you gain is priceless. You gain self-trust. You gain alignment. You gain the ability to look in the mirror and know that you didn't abandon yourself for temporary validation. Here's where the transformation begins. When your standards are deeply rooted in self-worth, not fear, not ego, not wounded pride, you become unshakable. You no longer chase closure from those who were never honest to begin with. You no longer beg for consistency from someone who's only consistent at being inconsistent. You stop trying to make someone see your value, and instead, you walk with the energy of a woman who knows it. And when that happens, everything starts to shift. Because the moment you stop asking, why didn't he choose me, and start asking, why did I even allow him access? That's the moment you reclaim your power. And that power becomes the foundation on which a new kind of relationship is built, one rooted in clarity, mutual respect, emotional maturity. But before you can receive that,